Good afternoon, Deanna.
Hello, good morning, Chet. We are ready.
Okay. Let me bring up the slides.
So good.
Okay, by my clock, it's 12:15, so let's rock. Good afternoon. Welcome to Apex for Lunch. And today we're going to talk about the impacts of more and less. My mother always said, you're never satisfied. You either have too much or too little. You're never satisfied. Well, right now, what we're seeing in the business world is more and less. And so how does that impact us, and where does that put us in the supply chain world? Pandemic, where we are, I just like to keep this posted. Global infections, more than 163 million people have been infected around the world, almost 164, and that's reported. Both the death number and the infections number, people are saying now they think that those are probably understated. We're seeing maybe 30% of the actual, because there are a lot of countries that are not reporting, or they're not reporting effectively. People are dying not in hospitals. We're seeing this in film from India on a regular basis now. And so there hasn't been really good scorekeeping being done around the world on what the impacts have been. This is what we know. This is what's been reported. And so this may be 30%, it may be 50% of the actual numbers. But there have been more than 163 million people infected, and almost 3.4 million people have died. In the US, we're approaching 33 million infections, and the infection rate is still climbing. We're still having people reporting every day with new infections. And we've had 586,000 deaths. So we're in there at about somewhere around 1.5%. So it's we're holding on. Now in Mexico, they reported 2.3 million infections and 220,000 deaths. Now, if you go back and look at my report from last month, you'll see that the infection number has gone up. I'm sorry, the infection number has stayed the same, but the death number has gone up. And their death number now is just under 10% of the reported infection. So something didn't get into the numbers. And so I know that those numbers are askew. When we look at where we are with the vaccinations here in the US, Maine, the state of Maine is number one. All my friends, I grew up in New Hampshire, and I was stationed in Portland, Maine, for a large part of my my stint with the U.S. Coast Guard, and so Maine is a favorite place of mine. But they have vaccinated 48.65%, almost 49% of their population has been vaccinated. And that's completely vaccinated, not just one shot, that's completely vaccinated. And Texas right now is 41st out of the 50 states at 31.95. And that's, we're going to see that the numbers are starting to slack off. Uh, the First, we'll go through the big news in the COVID pandemic for this past month. You can see if you look at the extreme right of the graph, the top number there says world, and that's the daily new confirmed COVID cases. And you'll see that that peaked earlier in the month of May and has started to come down. And about halfway down that column, you see the word India. Well, the world had 677,080 as an average daily report, and India was reporting 329,000 of those. So roughly 50% of the new cases were being reported out of India. The US has fallen all the way down to 33,000 new cases a day, which is a fairly dramatic drop from when we were leading the parade. You go back and look and you see where our numbers were at 250,000 a day back in February, January, February. So we've come down, and you can see down at the bottom of the page there, you got the United States, Canada, the United Kingdom, and Mexico. And Mexico's only reporting 2,304 cases a day. So, and the UK at 2,287. So they're below us percentage-wise and in raw numbers. Canada at 6,000. Canada's still having some issues, and they have parceled out, if you will, their vaccines. They wanted to get everyone vaccinated with one shot, thinking that that would get them to somewhere between 70 and 75% protection. And then they come back around and give everyone a second shot. So they're following through on that, and they're starting to see a decrease, and it'll get cleared up fairly quickly. Of course, Canada doesn't have a huge population, and 95% of their population lives within 60 miles of the US border. So they're pretty much tied to whatever's happening in the northern US rolls over into Canada. Vaccine supply chains, the volumes of vaccines that are being given out has dropped. Here in El Paso, we've seen notices that the University Medical Center has pushed back and said that they didn't need any new vaccines a couple of weeks ago. They're back on regular replenishment, but they're getting it at a much slower pace. And then this past week, with the introduction of or the approval to allow children from the ages of 12 to 16 to get vaccinated, we saw an uptick in the number of vaccinations as parents were bringing their kids to get them vaccinated. But the total volume has dropped off. The easy ones, those of us who really wanted to get vaccinated, we got out there, we sat in the lines and we got our vaccination done. And now we're benefiting from that. As you can see at the bottom of this slide, the CDC has decided that everyone who has been vaccinated can get rid of their masks. But many of us are hesitant. I still put on my mask when I go to the store. I got a haircut the other day and I wore my mask, and the lady that does my hair was very happy. She was not wearing a mask. She said, if you don't want to wear it, you don't have to. I said, no, that's all right. I've created a habit now, and it's going to be hard for me to back away from that. There are 122 million people in the US who have been completely vaccinated. That's 36, almost 37% of the population. This was as of the weekend, so it's probably well over 37% by now. The problem that we're having is there are a whole lot of folks who uh, are anti-vaccination. Uh, they they don't want to be vaccinated for anything, uh, and so they're going to go in their direction. There are other people who say they don't trust the vaccine. They want to see what it looks like 5, 6 years from now. Has it created any long-term health problems for people? And so they're not going to get vaccinated. And a lot of people just have a hard time getting to the vaccination centers. And so a lot of the states and a lot of the regional areas have started pushing out and going to where the problems are. Here in El Paso, we've seen different groups organizing in the different neighborhoods and going local to give shots to smaller groups of people. When you do that, you're taking people's time, but you don't get as many people vaccinated in the same time frame. Vaccinations haven't stopped; they've slowed down. It's like in manufacturing parts for new products, you have this huge ramp up where the part gets approved, and then they want to fill their pipeline with all of this, and they do, and then it drops off and gets to a more stable level. Well, we're seeing the same thing now with the vaccines. The vaccines aren't going to go away. They've already said that later this fall, those of us that got the Pfizer and those that got the Moderna are going to have a booster shot that will help us resist some of the variants that are coming out. The South African variant has been the most difficult. There's a new variant coming out of India that people are concerned about. So the vaccine will keep you from dying from it, and it will reduce the chances that you'll have to go to the hospital, even with the variants. The more common forms of the disease, uh, they're completely held at bay by the current vaccines. So this is where we are currently. So then what about the excess inventory? Right? I mean, we just ramped all this stuff up. We went like crazy, and now all of a sudden things are slowing down. What about that inventory? The U.S. purchased, give or take a little bit, 100 million doses of AstraZeneca's version of the vaccine. But AstraZeneca hasn't even put in for an emergency release of their vaccine in the United States. So we hold the rights to 100 million doses. So 30 million of that has been bottled and is ready for distribution. Now, some of that has already been shipped out to India. Some has gone to Mexico, and some has gone to Brazil. They're trying to decide what they're going to do with the rest. And that isn't the 30 million, that's about 10 million. So there's still about 90 million doses of vaccine that the US has the right to, and the vaccine itself is in the US, but it's not permitted for use in the US. So right now, the authorities are trying to decide what they're going to do and where they're going to send it. I think what they're doing is, I hate to be political, but I think that what they're doing is they're looking to see where the need is going to be the greatest, and they'll send it there. Or if there's some political benefit for sending it to a particular place, then they'll send it there as well. So there's another 100 million doses there. And the vaccine companies have not slowed down. They're still building. They're still making vaccines, and they're still bottling vaccines, and they're still shipping vaccines. The distribution channels now are widening out, and they're taking them out to other parts of the world. I've been working with some folks at Pfizer in Eastern Europe. They are working full-time, getting vaccines out, getting them packaged and delivered out. and they're covering Eastern Europe and Western Asia from a plant in Bulgaria. They've got another plant in the Netherlands, no, in Belgium, I'm sorry, in Belgium, that's handling Western Europe. And what we're seeing is we've the companies have managed to process and create enough vaccine quickly that they've been able to subdue the heft of the pandemic. And now it's a matter of getting those people who have been vaccinated, getting them back to work and getting back into some sort of regular schedule. And as we do that, then we'll see some other changes in what's going on. So we have excess inventory of vaccine. I wanted to stop by on the Ever Given and give you an update. It's still at anchor in the lake, midpoint in the Suez Canal. It's at anchor. The crew is still on the ship. They're not allowed to leave. They're under arrest, as is the ship. Egypt has asked for 919 million US dollars for the release of the ship and its cargo. And last month I went through the problem with this is there's nothing on that ship that has any tie to the United States. The ship is owned by a Japanese company, but it's managed by a Taiwanese company. The crew is Indian, but they were hired by a German company that manages crews for these ships. And so there's a lot of turmoil around us. Multiple court cases are currently being heard at the World Court. When out of that 919 million, 300 million is for the salvage bonus. That's for the companies that work to salvage the ship and the load. 300 million is for reputation damage for the Suez Canal, because they had all these other ships that couldn't make it through because of this. And so they say that their reputation has been damaged. And the rest is for the loss of income while the canal was blocked and the actual salvage and the damage incurred by the canal. So there's a lot of pieces to this. But what I put this in for was as sort of this is a learning point for those of us in supply chain. Think about the people who own the material. If you look at the picture there in the lower right corner, every one of those containers, and there are thousands of those containers on that ship, every one of those is owned by a company, and they promised and committed to their customer that they would have that material. And it was shipped with good faith that it would get there on time. This is like getting red lighted. If you've ever been shipping product into Mexico and it gets red lighted, and you have to go through taking the load off of the trailer, searching through the entire load. Same thing happens coming from Mexico into the US. You hit the tripwire and your load gets, those are very simple in comparison to this. But these things happen. Right now, around the world, there are more than 600 ships that are under arrest. So this isn't necessarily a one-off. This one got a lot of attention. But if you've got merchandise on a ship, most of the time they're going to go through. Same as put it on a truck. Most of the time it'll go through. But sometimes you're going to run into these problems. They aren't something that you can forecast. They're not something that you can control, but you're responsible because you haven't delivered the goods. So think about this. This has been 3 months now. And if you had anything in there, the temperature along the Suez Canal this time of year is in the 80s and 90s during the afternoon, cools down in the evening. In the sun, direct sun, it may get up over 100 degrees Fahrenheit. So if you had stuff in there and it's been sitting there in these conditions, what's it going to be like when they finally do get it and they unload those things and it gets to your business and you open the door? What are you going to see on the inside of that container? So what's happening in the rest of this? Well, supply chains worldwide had an increase of business activity of 10% up. It was over 10% actually in Q1. So in the first quarter, the activity, the business activity of all of the supply chains worldwide increased. There's more demand out there and people want more things. The order activity increased by 16.9%. So we saw orders go up considerably, and we know that suppliers are having problems meeting the demand. One, they're having issues getting their supplies. They're having issues getting their workers back to work. They're having problems meeting the speed of the demand because people want it now. They've used up their inventory and they're sitting there and they see an opportunity to get out in the market and sell more product. And what happens? They don't have the wherewithal to do that. And so they start pushing hard. We saw this in the auto industry. We'll talk more about that in the next slide. But in the US, manufacturers saw an 80% increase year over year from March of 2020 to March of 2021. It was an 80% increase. That's a huge amount of increase. And with all of the ups and downs in the marketplace, that's a pretty significant number. Invoice volumes only grew about 20% during the same period. And so you can see cash flow has been decreasing in the manufacturing sector. Orders are up, but if you can't manufacture and you can't ship and the customer can't receive, then the customer is not going to pay. The customer is only going to pay after they receive their goods. So what we see is an increase in orders and a fairly steep ramp up, but the invoices aren't keeping pace because the termination, the end of the order, the fulfillment of the order has not been taking place. And so that's stretching the cash flow across manufacturing. And that could be difficult because that means that they're going to have to go and borrow more money and hold money and try and make ends meet. So why is this happening? Well, there's pent-up demand as businesses are getting bullish about the summer sales. They're looking out there and they're saying, yeah, this is going well. And, you know, people want to get out, they want to travel, they want to do this, they want to do that. And so we're seeing this pent-up demand. People have been staying home. They haven't been doing much except buying on Amazon. And now all of a sudden they're able to go to stores and buy clothing and other things. And they've gotten some money from the government that's helping with that. The stimulus package is doing exactly what they said it would do. It's stimulating the economy. So demand is up. Businesses are ready to sell. And that's creating the shortages that we're seeing further upstream in the supply chains. We've got shortages in plastics. That's a leftover from the bad weather in Houston back early this year when everything froze up, and a number of the plasticizer operations there fell short, and they are just now starting to come back online. We're seeing shortages in fabrics because other countries where the fabrics are woven have been going through the pandemic and they've shut down, and the fabric inventory that was in the pipeline has been consumed, and now we're seeing shortages there. ICs, We talked about ICs last month. ICs are going to be a problem for at least another year, maybe two, possibly even 3 years. Uh, we've seen that, new plants are being built in Arizona, and there are talks of other new plants coming online that will make more ICs. That's great, but it's going to take 2 years to get a plant built and get it online. And we've seen some shortages in different food items. And so that is coming, we'll see how that works out. The fuel shortages on the East Coast from the ransomware attack, that's going to impact costs as well. East Coast gas prices, there were pictures out there of gas stations charging $15, $16 a gallon for gas, gouging. Now, I came from a business where we called that opportunity pricing. We had an opportunity, we priced it a little bit differently. So the future view, as we look at all of this, some of these price hikes will fall back in line. The food costs should stabilize as the new crops are harvested and processed. Lumber costs are very high right now because they haven't had trees cut, and they haven't been harvesting trees pretty much for the last year. And so now a whole lot of people are trying to move out of the city, and they want to get away from the big cities. They want to get out into the suburbs or into the more rural areas, and they want to change their lifestyle. They've had this year of sitting and looking at the four walls of their tiny little apartment in New York or LA, Chicago, and they're saying, hey, this isn't for me. I want something more. And so they're out there looking. So lumber costs have gone back up, and they'll stay high through the summer, but then it should start coming down. Housing costs are going to stay high into 2022. The housing shortage, currently listings on new houses, if you put your house up for sale today, on average, it'll sell in 18 days. That's just a little over 2 weeks. So you put it up and you'll sell it before the 1st of June. So now it'll be right after the 1st of June. So if you're looking for the cash coming in this month, you might be able to get a down payment. But a lot of these people are buying homes here in the El Paso area. They're buying homes and they're paying more than the seller is asking. They're going above the seller's ask price and paying extra so that they can get the house, because there aren't any houses for sale. Petrochemicals will likely be affected by the weather. If the weather's good, prices will come down. If the weather is bad, we have more tropical storms and hurricanes in the Gulf, we'll see prices go higher. And if the wheels really come off in the Middle East, prices will go higher again. There was a group of scientists at the University of Virginia, and I put this in because we're all problem-solving people. It caught my attention. I said, this is interesting. We'll talk about this a little bit. A group of scientists did this study on problem solving, and they published a paper about their results. And they find that humans more often add things to solve problems rather than subtract things. So think about your problem solving experience, and how many times have you sat in a brainstorming session and 90% of the ideas are, well, if we could put this in there, if we could add this thing, if we could do more here, as opposed to how could we take things away and solve this problem? Our mindset is we can't look at every possible solution for a problem. And so we use things like root cause analysis and other formats to reduce the potential solutions down to a smaller number of promising candidates. But in this pruning, taking away those things that we think aren't going to really work out, we're biased towards solutions that add components instead of those that subtract components. The result? Well, it matters. And potentially it could matter a lot, because Defaulting to searches for additive changes may be one reason that people struggle to mitigate overburdened schedules, institutional red tape, and damaging effects on the planet. So as we wrap up, think about that. When you're doing your next problem-solving event, are you adding or are you taking away? So think less. No, wait. Think more about less. No, that's not right either. So we'll have to come up with a better answer. What would you like to discuss next time? What's causing you problems right now and what issues or concerns do you have? Give us your ideas. Use the chat box or email me at cframe@bbcintl.com and I will try to get your ideas integrated into our program for next month, which will be Apex for Lunch, the June version. In the meantime, we've got Planning and Demand and S&OP coming up May 29th, CPIM on June 5th, CSCP June 26th, Manufacturing and MRP July 10th, and on. All of those classes are currently scheduled to be done online, but we will be talking later today about opening up and doing in-person classes. So have a great month. I hope it's been worthwhile, and I will talk to you at another point in time.
Thanks.
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you.
Great job.
Thank you.
Thanks, Chet.
Thanks, Michael.
Goodbye.
Goodbye.
Thanks, Chet.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Goodbye.
Bye-bye. Nos vemos, Alex y Antonio. Estamos ahí en comunicación. Cuídense. Bye.
Nos vemos. Bye.
Bye-bye.